Welcome to the Brand Forum. This is going to be an awesome episode. I am so excited to have Mr. Brad Feinberg with us today. Josh, are you excited?
I'm very excited. I was going to share this a long time ago. A long time ago, I drank beer, and this was like, and I had a little tap in my basement for it that I had. So had to get the Pilsners out since we were talking.
That is perfect, because we're going to touch on a lot of the different innovations and strategies of what Brad has been working on. So without further ado, our next guest has been a friend, an ally, and a wonderful person in our industry for such a long time. Brad, we've known each other for a long time, and we're excited to have you on as a guest. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a bit more about what you've been doing throughout your career, and we're going to jump right into it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. And looking forward to the conversation. I've now, like, hard to believe, it seems like a flash to some extent, but also a really long time to another. I'm now in my 29th year of my career. I think next year will be 30 years of like professional experience. The first chapter of my career was on the agency side, working was full service agencies, and then moved into media holding company agencies and worked on a lot of blue chip brands. I then moved into client side role in the early 2000s working in entertainment. And I spent almost, I think, 5 years or so in the entertainment business working at Discovery Communications. Think of those like the heydays of cable television that, doesn't, think about how much that has evolved since that time period is kind of crazy to think. And then from there, I started at Molson Coors, was at the time Miller Coors, and I've been doing lots of different roles inside the company in the areas of marketing, building capabilities for the organization. February was my 16th anniversary here at Molson Coors. So I've had a pretty good run for all things considering. So, and I tell people why I've stayed is that it's always changing. And I feel like my role has changed a lot over the years, and the world of marketing has changed a lot as well. And I've had the fortune of working with different CMOs. I at one point reported to our CEO for a very short window when we were without a CMO. And I've always felt the very openness to my ideas or the types of things that I wanted to bring to the organization. And as a result of that, I've been able to do a lot, right, in that 16-year period, and really helped us transform the way we think about marketing and the way we go to market for our brands. 16
years is crazy, and it just makes all three of us just seem very old, just for how long that we've known each other.
Yes,
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's better than me trying to do it. So you have had such a unique role in just twists and turns in every couple of years. Your roles change at Molson Coors, which is just so cool to see. And that's part of the reason why you've stayed there and continue to ascend and build these different functions. One of the reasons why we wanted to reach out to you specifically for being one of our earlier guests on the show is because you've had such unique roles and strengths of building out and overseeing media, digital, e-commerce. And when you think about it, all of these business functions roll up into one team. How do you do that? How does that work in this modern day and age?
Yeah, I mean, the philosophy I lived by, at least for my tenure at Molson, has been about modernize or become obsolete. And for legacy CPG companies, it's not so easy to do. Companies that have a lot of different layers or practices by which they think is the only way to do things. And for the good or bad of it, I work in a category that is always changing. It's gone through its ups and downs. As a result, it had to really think of new ways to do things to be successful, right? Just doing the same old thing that beer brands were built on, 50 years ago. I mean, we're celebrating this year the 50th anniversary or birth of Miller Lite, which is kind of crazy to believe. We just celebrated 2 years ago the 150th birthday of Coors Banquet. So these are old brands, right? These are brands that have been around for, centuries in some cases. And as a result, right, we have to think about, and the world of marketing has changed so dramatically. And so to think you can apply that same way of doing things and get the same result, right? That old adage doesn't exist. So I've been fortunate to be able to look at the world through that lens and understand that we need to bring certain capabilities together, look at outside the company and how people do things at other companies, try to take the best of those and build from there. And so my role today, I oversee, as you said, media, digital, which includes precision, first-party data acquisition strategies. It includes marketing analytics. So I run kind of a flywheel from everything we go buy from a media standpoint to how we optimize it. And then new to my remit, in about just over a year, has been in the e-commerce space. So I run our e-commerce business both on a retail media standpoint, but also overseeing the team that kind of is customers, those retailers that are e-commerce based. We are like the customer sales team, right? We work with them as counterparts to make sure that they're optimizing their assortment on our behalf and our brand. So think of the third parties like a DoorDash or an Instacart or an Uber Eats or even a GoPuff are some examples that we own those relationships. And as the business has evolved into the non-elk space, right, we're starting to look at it through a new lens of places that were prohibited for us to be in because of the regulation in the industry.
Everything. So there's this, everything you're talking about, the brands that you mentioned, just the fact that you're throwing out 3-digit anniversary years.
Yeah.
But obviously, you fall under that category of we have iconic brands. And so I feel like we've marketing has changed so much to a point where there's this balance between performance and building brand equity. And I have always found there's a real struggle in balancing that. And when I've leaned too far into the performance side, later you find brand equity suffers, and then vice versa. I'd love for you to share just how are you guys thinking about that in a world where your category is so competitive that performance marketing completely matters, but at the same time, you've got these brands that you want to make sure still get continue to build their equity.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things in this category in particular, backbone of this category is advertising and marketing and building brands with equity, right? I had a CMO once that said, our objective is for when someone says at a bar and they're holding a Miller Lite, they want to make sure if someone says, why are you drinking that they can feel confident in the decisions they're making, right? And beer, in a lot of cases in these brands, built themselves on that. These are brands that have badge value to them. It does have a reflection on you when you pick one up, right? And you want to have the confidence to do so. So branding and building brands with some kind of purpose to them or linkage to them is super important for this category. Otherwise, you would see the proliferation of of brands that are not linked to a big company, that are, more the generic, right? Other categories have kind of built out, right? We don't have that. You don't see that in this category. And then when they do happen, they often don't last very long because the brand has to mean something. As it relates to the question, my maybe push on it has been, and I've thought about this a lot, because you do see a lot of in this industry that thinking that there is two sides to this. You have to either be focused on building brand equity or building performance. I argue everything should do both, period. There is no real difference, and that actually when we build brand, we're also building performance. When we're building performance, we're also building brand. So I think the separation actually is not to the service of what we are trying to do. I actually think it's a big disservice. And the real opportunity is to convince the marketing world to think of them as one rather than to think of them as two and set their organizations up as two. That's one of the benefits we talked about, like how I set up my organization or my team. We do both brand and performance, right? I'm thinking about media strategies and plans to drive brand equity over the long term. I have digital marketing where I'm driving, I can short term. All of my analytics is designed around looking at short-term performance. But at the same token, there's a lot of things we invest in from a media standpoint that I know has very small scale, but over time is going to drive brand equity. I have the opportunity to play those levers in the way I think is going to be the best to drive the brand's objectives without the worry that like I have to focus on one or the other, or that I have to put more money into one pot versus the other pot. I think of them as one and the same. And we just have to figure out how to make sure both are delivering every time we go to market.
This week, we've got some food for bot with our Comscore data diva, Aubriana Alvarez-Lopez, co-founder and COO at Ignicio.ai. As AI evolves and advances, how do you see it improving the accuracy and reliability of cross-platform audience measurement?
Thanks, Sam. AI isn't just evolving, it's revolutionizing. And at Ignicio, we believe that the future of measurement doesn't live in one channel or one walled garden. It lives in context. So our AI agents don't just track, they're interpreting, predicting, and aligning data across platforms in real time. So there's no more waiting for months for lagging insights. And since I know you guys love a good food analogy here, we're serving up intelligence fast, hot, and more customizable than some hash browns at Waffle House. Accuracy isn't a bonus, right? It's the baseline. And here's where I think it gets super interesting. Legacy measurement companies actually have a massive opportunity if they play it right. They've got decades of historical data, established trust, deep expertise, and that's a powerful foundation, but only if they modernize their infrastructure and unlock that data for real-time AI. And if they don't, new players will leapfrog them by building smarter, faster, and cleaner from day one. So the winners will be the ones who blend legacy wisdom with AI native agility.
You know, everything's performance just depends on how you measure it, right? Sure. So your TV, yeah, you're not going to see that immediate pull through, but you're not measuring it the same way you are measuring a search click. And so that sort of disconnect, I think that happens. I think that's what creates, the sort of system you were describing. So like if you could dig in a little bit on that short-term, long-term balance, like how do you balance for that? You know, both, again, you got these short-term goals, but you want to build, it's not even like long-term equity. I'm thinking long-term goals. I'd love to just delve a little bit into that piece of it.
I mean, we look at our brands in a way that allow us to we're building equity over time. We do want to see movement, and these are heritage brands, don't have an awareness problem, right? Like they have 90-ish% plus awareness on a brand like Miller Lite or Coors Light, even a brand like Blue Moon have just massive, there's not an awareness issue. So when you talk about building brands, it's never about we need to drive awareness, but what we have to do is make sure that you're considering us maybe one or more oftentimes when you're going to the shelf, when you're going to a bar. And so it's important that is something that we have to do. And then when we think about performance, right, it is still about driving business results. At the end of the day, I always say that my one of my objectives is to make sure my chief financial officer knows that we are spending the dollars in the best way possible on behalf of the business, right? And that we're making decisions that are going to drive the expectations of the individual brands and to do that as effectively as possible. And so at the same time, as we're building these brands over the long term, we're also have a very keen sense of what is driving business performance. How do we make sure we're optimizing our investments to ensure that it is going to drive the results that we set out to achieve?
Does it make it harder to have brands with such good equity?
It can. It's a good question. I mean, I think it can in the way that there may be it's hard to change perceptions on a brand when it has such strong equity, right? So if you already have a perception, it's really difficult to change. The good news is every year someone turns 21, right? Lots of people turn 21. A lot of new people enter the category. So we have new customers and consumers that we need to bring in and make our brands relevant to them. You do find that a lot of consumers are interestingly, they'll say like, well, my dad drank that, that's why I drink that, right? So there is some stuff that kind of gets passed on from generation. In some cases, there's like a real connection point with this category. In other ways, though, like a lot of the innovation in the category is in newer, flavorful alternatives, right? Canned, whether it's canned cocktails, whether it's in our case, we launched Happy Thursday last year, which is a non-carbonated kind of beverage that's supposed to resemble or feel like you're drinking a refresher, like you would at a Starbucks with alcohol. And then there's hard seltzers, right, and all in that category. And so the taste profiles and the flavors that younger consumers are looking for are not the same as their parents might have had. And as a result, we have to invent those brands from the ground up. And it's really hard to stand out in a very crowded category where everyone's going after that same thing. And then on top of that, take into account that younger consumers don't consume alcohol at the same amount, or they're more choiceful when they consume alcohol than maybe their previous generations had done. It's not the only option for them anymore.
Now overseeing e-commerce and retail, and you have all of these new brands, and there's only X amount of shelf space. It becomes a new conundrum, a quandary. There are additional opportunities for you to go and market and test new products to different as these new consumers as they are exposed to the new brands and innovations, and taste buds change and behaviors change, and you create more NA brands and you create more seltzers. So walk us through for a moment or so just how that is changing within the past 16 years of being at Molson Coors.
I mean, when I started, right, it was the majority of the business, and still, I mean, for all practical purposes, the majority of the business today is still in big premium light brands. Like they're just, the volume that comes off of them is just enormous. And
Coors Light,
Coors Light, Miller Lite is good examples of that versus our competition. But at the same token, because those taste profiles have changed, it's our job to find new spaces for us to bring new offerings that are competitive to where those new trends are going. So I have to give credit to our innovation team who does a lot of that work to really seek out and understand future taste profiles and trends that are going on and try to understand, is that an opportunity for us and a space for us to get into? To your point, there are opportunities where consumers are not drinking alcohol, but they want a beverage and that type of same social occasion. So looking at occasions, I think, is a big part of it. But looking at the occasion, and making sure that we have products available for you in any particular occasion. So if you're in an occasion for a non-alcoholic occasion, or you're not interested, we have Peroni 00, we have Blue Moon NA.
It's good. Peroni 00 is really good.
It's my go-to. One of my go-tos, actually.
One of mine too. Yeah.
We just launched a brand called Naked Life, which is the number one mocktail, kind of canned mocktail brand coming from Australia. We just launched that in the US on Amazon. And we have 5 different flavors or offerings there. We have a mojito, a margarita, right? No alcohol, 5 calories, all natural ingredients. Again, to make sure that we have an answer for a consumer trend that's going on, and we think something that can scale with the right flavor profile.
So how do you prepare for the future of marketing when you're across dozens upon dozens upon dozens of different brands and SKUs?
Wait, and also generations. I got to throw that one in.
Oh, wow. That's algebra right there.
I mean, I always have my eye towards, as I said at the offset, my job is to make sure we modernize the way we do things or become obsolete. So as I prepare for the future of marketing, I'm making sure that we are set up for success for the needs of the business and looking at the way we can kind of use technology to help supplement that, right? If we can get smarter with technology, if we can augment the way we do things, if we can move faster to make decisions and to do it with more precision, I think that's that's the lens by which I put a lot of the capabilities we build through. So if I'm building a precision team and and the focus of that is data acquisition, we know that what comes from that data acquisition that we can then go market to consumers that have raised their hand that they like our brands, or look for consumers that are like them, right? There's a huge upside to that in a marketing effectiveness standpoint. We're actually going to help grow our business as a result. And it could help us glean insights off of new products for our innovation team through, ways at which we can kind of message and find new opportunities to introduce them to new products. So that's ultimately what I look at. I do also want to make sure that it is not add technology or technology for technology's sake, really looking at all the components of them and making sure, like I've always said, like, we need to keep our sources of truth to a minimum. Once I start building multiple sources of truth that do slightly different things but overlap, then we're not doing the business justice, and it creates more complexity that's needed.
Yeah, which actually like blends into, of course, like we have to talk about AI. So, but it does seem to crash into, like,
sure.
Like how are you guys thinking about that? How are you using that under the lens of what you lead actually?
Yeah, that's a great question. I sit on our Gen AI Steerco at Molson, which we set up last year, and it's designed for it's a cross section of key stakeholders in the organization that covers everything from like our IT team, our legal team, our compliance, ethics and compliance team, right? There's a makeup supply chain of makeup across the organization. And we're designed around, this Steerco is designed around parts of the organization that want to explore areas within AI. It's our job to assess whether that's the right use case to pursue or right opportunity to pursue. And making sure, because there's so many different ways it can be. And I heard someone say not too long ago that there is a benefit in AI to be a late mover, not a first mover.
Apple. That's Apple.
And so I'm not interested in just jumping on every new hot trend that's available, but really understanding, like, what are the ways, like, how does it help serve the objectives we're trying to achieve? So in my area, for example, take e-commerce. We do product detail pages on e-commerce platforms, right? We do a lot of different creative generation there. Our brand teams, the challenge that I think we have is that our brand teams are very focused on creating assets that are designed around really consumer and more advertising, and not necessarily product-based creative or assets that are designed for the e-commerce environment that we know are going to drive better results in terms of driving performance. So there is a big opportunity for us to use generative AI, or at least explore the opportunity to how do we make sure that we can create the right creative from whatever design baseline that we have in a way that is appropriate for the market and drive costs down in our way to do that. So that's one use case by which we would look at and consider. It's not something we have stood up yet to date, but it's something definitely on the pipeline that we're looking at right now.
That's great.
That's really intriguing. Josh, I love that you asked that question, because every time we talk to another marketing exec, hearing how each decision maker is applying AI to their teams, to their products, to their technology, to their SaaS, it's really refreshing to hear how some people embrace it, how some people take bits and pieces of it day by day, and others are just like, you know what, we're just going to wait a little bit. We're going to see how it all comes together, and then we're just going to maximize the outputs. So Brad, that doesn't surprise me, knowing how you think about the space and knowing how you think about innovation. You are one that takes it all in and then makes very strategic decisions. So kudos to you. Let's transition this a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about just you, Brad Feinberg, the person, the exec. How did you become a marketer? Just walk us through. I know you went to KU, Kansas University, yes, but you didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I want to be one of the world's largest beer marketers. Did you? Maybe.
Kind of. No, I'm just kidding. Seriously, like I've always been when I was in high school, I was very into being like, I took art classes. I was very very creatively driven, like creative writing, that type of thing. And I had a teacher in high school, an art teacher in high school, that as like, I think my senior year was like trying to decide on where to go to school and maybe think about career choices, really directed me towards the world of advertising. And in that, he's like, you're artistic. Maybe there's some things you can do there. You should look at that. So I thought, when I went to school and when I went to University of Kansas, we don't call it Kansas University, Jeremy.
Sorry. But I should apologize to my wife too. Then
when I went to KU, which is where you got that. I majored in advertising. I took an elements of advertising class by a professor by the name of Tim Bankston, who said like it was basically Leo Burnett or bust for him. He was an ex Leo Burnetter, and I learned like about David Ogilvy and just really the whole profession of advertising. And I fell in love with that part of it. I just love the spirit of the creativity. I thought I wanted to be a copywriter for years in college. And then I was working on my portfolio. I came back to Chicago. I met with a bunch of creative agencies, walked them through my work, and there were like 5 people and I got 15 different opinions. And so I came back to school very discouraged by the creative field. And then I took a media course. And what I loved about media, and this is kind of, I prided myself in my career ever since, is that you can be creative, right, strategically, but you have data to back it up, right? And the data is what unlocks the decision making, right? Like it's none of the subjectivity of like one person having an emotional reaction to something or otherwise. I had data at my fingertips to say why I thought that strategic idea or why that creative way to kind of market was important. And that kind of unlocked everything for me. And so that's basically what I built my career on. So I still try to come up with creative ideas, but oftentimes, like I bring creativity to the way I think about media. I bring creativity. I think about e-commerce, as we talked about. I built our in-house creative team with a lot of the same principles in mind, but at the same token, I have a lot of the data and analytical knowledge and capability now too, so I can bring those two things together.
Brad, this has been awesome. This has been such a fun chat. I know we went a few minutes over than what was planned, but we just want to say thank you so much for hopping on with you. We really appreciate it. Thanks for being one of our earlier guests for the Brand Forum. And thank you everybody for listening and watching. We appreciate it. Thanks, Josh.